Virtual Shade Tree Workshop. I'm Tanya with SRP, and if you weren't already aware, SRP is a community-owned public utility, giving us the ability to make customer service our #1 priority. That is just one reason why SRP is excited to continue this exciting program for you. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, also known as Arizona Statehood Day, and SRP played a role in that happening. To explore more about SRP history, please visit srp.net/history. I'll also be monitoring a Q&A to answer any efficiency, rebate, program, or general SRP questions you might have. Now here's Brittany again with Trees Matter.
Thank you, Tanya. Yes, I have not introduced myself. My name is Brittany. I am the Utility Shade Tree Program Manager with Trees Matter, and we are so grateful to be able to host these workshops in partnership with SRP. We will be trying to keep this presentation to about an hour. Make sure you stay until the end for very important information about pickup and ordering your trees, okay? Now, just a couple of other things to turn on your closed caption. Make sure you just check your navigation on your Zoom there for the closed caption options. You can bring that up really easily. We will also be posting links to what we call our virtual packet and also the PowerPoint slides in the chat as we get started. So you can follow along with that. You're also going to receive all of that information, the PowerPoint slides, the virtual packet, a recording of the workshop that we have today, and some other resources in an email that you'll receive in a few days up to about a week. For any questions that you may have already noticed the Q&A. Please try to hold those questions until towards the end. This presentation is just chock full of so much information, and it is just very, very likely that we are gonna get to the subject of your question. So please just keep that in mind. Any quick questions you have, definitely do use that Q&A. We have some tree experts on the line to help and answer any questions that may come up as you're going through the presentation. To use that Q&A, you just want to go to the open question section. You type in a question, go to the open question section. Once it's answered, you can find it in the answered tab. And then you can also look through all of the other questions people have asked in that Q&A section and learn from that. Very useful. Now, your instructor today is going to be Ryan Wood. Ryan is a water program specialist with the city of Tempe. Ryan shares with you his extensive knowledge in water harvesting, tree care, and permaculture design, along with his skills and enthusiasm for creating sustainable livelihoods. Ryan is excellent, and we always enjoy his instructorship. So everybody welcome Ryan Wood.
Thank you, Brittany. I really appreciate that warm welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I say this every time, but I get so excited for these workshops. I just know that we're going to be thousands of trees are going to be distributed through this program. And so I truly thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to attend this workshop. I know the information on the screen you're already familiar with, because you wouldn't be attending this workshop if you were not familiar with this, because that's one of the requirements, that you attend this workshop. Also, that you understand that you have the ability to plant the trees about 15 to 20 feet away from your house on that west, east, and south side of the property, and I'll cover that in a lot more detail. But also that you understand that Trees Matter or another third party may reach out and contact you to follow up on the health and the growth of your trees, and that's really important to us. It just helps for this program to be successful. As Brittany mentioned, you're going to get your virtual packet. So I'm going to cover a lot of information today, but rest assured, this is all going to be in that packet. So everything that I cover, you're going to have in the packet. And for example, as far as watering, this is the establishing, once your plants get established. And this is not just for your new tree. This is for all your desert adapted and high water use plants. Also in your packet, you're going to how to prune, and you're not going to have to worry about that for the first year or so, but you are going to need to know how to prune your tree, and then how to water them and how to plant them. Definitely some important links that you're going to want to note down. You're going to call 811 or reach out to them online at arizona811.com for that as well in more detail. But if you have any questions or concerns, please contact Trees Matter by email or by phone. You also have an opportunity to ask an arborist, and so on the Facebook page. So lots of opportunities to ask your questions. And definitely for more on SRP programs. And now I'm curious that I'm going to have to check out what Tanya mentioned earlier about how SRP was played a big role in our statehood. And then that Water Use It Wisely landscaping packet. That is just full of information. You're going to, the landscape watering by the numbers guide, which you're going to see some of that information. But as I mentioned, that's not just for your plant, but your tree that you're getting, it's for all your plants. Okay, why plant a tree? There are so many reasons why we should plant a tree. And you can see on the screen, you have your environment, your finance, your home. So let's take a look at a few of those. So we live in an arid climate, and yeah, it's hot. And so how do we cool down those spaces so we can enjoy the outdoors more? Well, we're going to cast shadows. And so we can create these living outdoor areas by planting trees and also the shrubs and the ground covers that are going to help cool those surfaces that are collecting heat. So by casting more shadows is how we can live outdoor and more and enjoy more of our seasons. But planting a tree for air quality, that alone is a good reason to plant a tree. It filters our dust. It provides us oxygen. So definitely trees play a huge role in our life. So add value to your property. I personally know this one when my wife and I, when we were looking for a home in 98, I wanted that low maintenance landscape, 2 desert trees, an ocotillo and a red yucca, not very specific at all, right? But that is exactly what we found. And those trees and ocotillo and yucca are still providing value and shade onto our property. So definitely it can increase your property value. We can plant trees. Also, those shrubs and ground cover, we're creating that noise barrier. It provides privacy. So instead of just building a fence, we can use our plants. And we need to think about our wildlife, and by providing habitat for them, it'll attract them to our yards as well. And so the right type of shelter, trees that have thorns will provide extra shelter for our wildlife, but it's the seeds that they produce. Imagine the little quails that are running around or the birds that love seeds, but the hummingbirds, the butterflies, all are pollinators that will be attracted to the trees. I love this. It's not just the tree that you're planting. Look at that beautiful photo with that's the Palo Verde tree with the lime green trunk, the contrasting colors against that red wall. But look at those beautiful perennial flowers that are popping up in the spring. And I love this time of year. Our winter flowers are in bloom and going into our spring. So I want you to think about it as an integrated system. You're not just planting a tree, it's planting the tree and all the other plants that go with it to make it integrated. Provide a sense of place. I'm originally not from Arizona, and when I learned that the saguaro only grows in the Sonoran Desert, that's very impactful to me. So this is the photo that you see with the blue, our native blue Palo Verde, which is one of the trees on the list. Those beautiful yellow flowers with that saguaro growing. And the Palo Verde is our state tree. So definitely a good, strong sense of place. But if we provide shade, we can lower our temperatures 10 to 35 degrees. So getting that shade onto those walls, windows, and doors are very important. Because if we can reduce the heat, well, we can just shave off on our energy bill. So that's really good. We want to make, see those savings. And our desert is changing. We are getting warmer. It's those nighttime temperatures that are are increasing as well, and it's what we call the urban heat island effect. So it's all these surfaces that attract that heat during the day. So the concrete, the asphalt, the rocks on our landscape, our artificial turf, all these things are collecting heat, and then they release at night, causing our temperatures to be warmer. So if we can remove or reduce some of that hardscape, and for example, in a street side scenario, if we can cut the curb and bring stormwater into that street side, help nourish those trees, it's called green stormwater infrastructure. But shade, that is what we are here for today. And I love this photo. You know, we're always looking for that shaded parking spot, but where's the shadow going to get casted onto your walls, windows, and doors? How are you going to be able to maximize your energy savings? And that's what we're going to cover. And so I got a lot of information, and it's talking about what's the right tree, what's the right tree for you and for the place that you want to put it in. It's going to be very important. But how to plant your tree, how to care for your tree, and yep, I'm going to be popping up some polling questions throughout, so definitely pay attention. So how can we maximize our tree investment? Well, we got to learn about our site, the considerations, but solar, let's take a look at that, because their solar considerations is how we can really maximize our energy savings. So the illustration that you're seeing here, this is, imagine a clock, and you're putting it on the ground with the 12 facing north. Okay, so when the sun rises in June 21st around our summer solstice, that's when the sun rises about, well, represented on the number 2 on the clock. Okay, so it's rising in the northeast, but then it sets in the northwest, represented by the number 10 on the clock. Notice in the wintertime, it's the complete opposite. It rises in the southeast, represented by the number 4, and it sets in the southwest, represented by the number 8. And it's really low in the southern sky. So why is that important? Well, it's all about the microclimates. Where's the warm spots? Where are the cool spots? Where's the shadows getting casted throughout the time of year? And that's important for our energy savings. Another illustration is this is focused on the south side of your house. So those who have that perfect place on the south side of your home, I want you to be thinking about the type of tree that you're planting and the size of the tree. So this is the desert willow, also the lilac tree. They're the 2 smaller trees on the list, grow to about 20, 25 foot tall and wide. Planted about 15 feet from the house, you'll notice the summer sun, the shadows are not getting casted onto the house. But look at the winter. The shadows are getting casted on the house and onto the roof. When we go to the next size tree, this is going to be our native blue palo verde, our native velvet mesquite, and the thornless mesquite. Grow about 30 foot tall and wide. Planted 15 feet away from the house. You'll notice in the summertime at noon, we're getting shadows on the house, on the walls, and on the roof. But look at the wintertime. We get a lot of shadows on the south side. So this is the tallest tree on the list. That's the willow acacia. It's about 40 foot tall and 20 foot wide. Planted about 15 feet away from the house. We're going to get some shadow a bit on the house during the summer, but look at all that winter shadow. So my message is if you're planting on the south side of your home, think about planting a deciduous tree, a tree that drops all its leaves. So that way in the wintertime, you're not casting a lot of shadow on the home that's making your heat bills rise. So the 2 trees that are fully deciduous on the list are your desert willow and your chase lilac tree. Okay, we have the planting zone. So the planting zone, we want you to plant about 15 to 20 feet away from your house. And the reason why is we want the shadows casted onto the house. The west side is your first choice because this is the hottest side of our house. So notice planting here on the west, on the east side, that's your second choice. The south side is your last choice. And notice the covered patio is not included in that zone. Neither is the north side of the house. Now, it's not that it's not a good place to plant trees. It's just we're not maximizing our energy savings by planting in those locations. So if you do have that perfect spot on the north side, support your local nurseries. There's lots of trees to choose from. Check with your local municipalities. For example, the city of Tempe has rebates for planting trees and shrubs, all low water use plants. Our urban forester has a cost match program. So there might be other options for you for planting trees and other plants in areas that are not part of this program. All right, here's your first polling question. Let me go ahead and pop that up real quick. Okay, and go ahead and start putting in your answers as soon as you'd like. So where should you plant your tree to maximize shade? Is that north side of my home, which I mentioned would be good for supporting your local nurseries? Is it B, the west side of my home? Yeah, that gets really hot. It's the east side of my home. That's the second choice. D, the west and east sides of my home. Okay, so is it A, B, C, or D? Just give you a few more seconds. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. So the correct answer is D. However, for all those who put in B, you're right too. That west side that's the hot side and the east side. And those are the two sides we really should be focusing on. Okay. Another tool that you have in your toolbox, it's called the solar compass. This is just another way of thinking about where the warm spots and the cool spots are. So if you imagine that the compass is shown on the house, meaning the shadows that are casted from the house makes it cooler on that east northeast side. But then on the west, southwest, that's our warmer. So if you think about planting a plant underneath your tree or near your tree, and you look at the label and it says full sun, you can put that more onto that warmer side. If it wants some shade, you're going to be planting it more on the east to northeast. And wind, wow, we get some crazy wind here. And so it can come from all sorts of different directions throughout the year, but a prevailing wind is coming from the southwest. So I want you to be thinking about how you can plant your trees to build that windbreak. So that way when the wind's blowing, it's blowing through the trees. It helps filter that air. It helps reduce the velocity and adds a little extra humidity to our environment. But it's all about that proper placement, really to maximize the energy savings. And so that's why you'll see that, walls, it's the windows. We really need to focus on those windows. They're all, parts of where we're going to lose that energy. But our windows, walls, and doors, and so they're all things we want to cast shadows on. But I don't want you to plant the tree right in front of the window. I want you to plant the tree to where it casts the shadow at the right time of the day on that window. Okay. And that you plant them 15 to 20 feet from the house on the west, east, or south. Now, why does that patio and overhang gets the big thumb down? Well, it's, as I mentioned earlier, we want you to plant the tree to cast a shadow on an air-conditioned part of the building. So that way you can maximize your energy savings. And traffic patterns. This is important. When we're thinking about placing our tree or other plants, we have to think about how we flow throughout our yard. How does the person that delivers the mail to your mailbox, how do they flow through your yard? If you have dogs, they set very definite patterns. And so we need to take that in consideration when we're planting our tree. And also, too, if it's a high traffic area, we may consider planting a tree that doesn't have thorns. And definitely, if you have a shared landscape, we have to take that in consideration. So if you have that perfect spot on that west side of your house, but part of that tree canopy is going to overhang into the neighbor's side of their property. So talk with them, let them know what you're doing, why you're planting the tree to save energy, and let them know that the shadow casted from your tree onto the east side of their wall is going to help them. Also let them know about the program so they can go get a couple free trees as well. If you have slope to your yard, I like that because I know now I can shape that ground to be able to slow spread and sink the rainwater when we do get the rain, which I've been fortunate to get a little bit these last couple of days. And that reflected heat and sun, that can be really hard on plants. And so by planting our tree to help cast the shadows, it's going to reduce that heat and sun. All right, here's your next polling question. So what areas of my home are most vulnerable to heat gain from the sun? A, patios and overhangs. B, the walls. C, windows. Or D, all but windows are most vulnerable. So remember, I was talking about those windows, but they're all very important. Okay, so go ahead and give you a few more seconds to get your answers in. Okay. All right. For those who answer D, that is the correct answer. But I do want you to really focus on those windows. And as I mentioned, you're not planting the tree right in front of the window. You're planting it so it casts the shadow on the window at the right time of day. Okay, when we're planting, well, before we plant, we got to look up. We got to make sure if there's any above ground utilities, those power lines, and that we're planting the tree far enough away from them. And you can see by the illustration, if we're planting the desert willow, the lilac tree that grows to about 20, 25 foot tall, we want to plant that at least to about 25 feet away from those big utility lines. The next trees that are 30 foot tall and wide, we're going to be planting those about 35 feet away. We want to make sure that they don't fall in. But that really tall willow acacia, we got to get it at least 40, 45 feet away. So that way it doesn't fall into the power lines. So we want to make sure that we do our part. So that way we're not planting the tree too close to the utility. So we want to make sure that we plant the tree in the right place. So now the big question is which tree is right for me? Wow, that's a big, that's a hard question. I personally love all the trees on this list. So I want you to be thinking, what's the right tree? What's the right characteristics out of the trees offered in this program are right for me? Those characteristics fit the space that I'd like to plant that tree. Now, if those don't match up, if you have a space that's only 5 or 10 feet, none of these trees are a good fit. That's too small of a space. Think of larger shrubs, vines, other plants that can help cast shadows onto those walls, windows, and doors. Also, too, if you live in an HOA, you want to make sure that the tree that you select is also on the HOA's plant palette. So that's going to be important because the HOA will have a list of plants that you're allowed to plant. You want to make sure it's on the list so that way you're not asked to remove the tree. It's going to be a real good chance that these are popular trees, so it's a good chance they are going to be on the list, but definitely check with them. Okay, now I'm going to cover the different trees that are offered. Again, it's in your packet. But I want you to take this time as I'm going through the characteristics to be thinking about the size. Is that too big of a tree for my space? Could I fit a bigger tree or should it be smaller? What type of characteristics am I looking for? Okay, so for the thornless mesquite, and I'm going to talk about the mesquites interchangeably. They're very similar as far as the characteristics. The big difference, well, it's the thornless is no thorns or very few, if any. Both the thornless and the native mesquite trees will grow to, about that 30 feet tall and wide. And they typically will grow a little bit wider than taller, and they have that wide spreading crown. Both have the little tiny narrow green leaves. The bark is dark and shaggy. And then it gets that elongated cream to white flower. Now that flower, it's going to turn into a seed pod. But the seed pods, as you can see here on the photo with the velvet mesquite, those seed pods turn into a seed that you can harvest at the right time of the year. That mesquite seed pods can get ground into a flour that you can use within your cooking. But one of those characteristics of the tree that you might like. So the velvet mesquite typically is low branched, has a canopy that typically is a little bit more open. The big difference here is they're going to have the tinier thorns versus the thornless. The litters from the trees are, pretty much the same. The mesquite trees will drop their tiny little leaves if it gets too cold, or if it's in a drought, it's going to drop those leaves. Now, if we neither happen and those leaves stay on, they're going to drop in the spring right before the new leaves get pushed out. So all the trees on the list, I personally would avoid planting them in grass. But if you have to, this is one tree that will take as much water or as little water as you give it. You just got to watch out. If it gets too much water, it's going to grow fast and big. And so the thing to keep in mind is if traffic patterns, it does have those small thorns. And so just to keep that in mind. Okay, here's our Arizona state tree. It's the native blue Palo Verde. And so the native blue Palo Verde, it's going to grow to about that 30-foot tall and wide. They have a naturally low, wide spreading crown structure with branches that are typically lower on the trunk. And that's a good thing. It helps the tree withstand the wind. And so like the mesquite tree, their tiny leaves are cold and drought deciduous. But when they do drop, because that beautiful bluish green color of the branches, it always pretty much looks like it's evergreen. In the springtime, if it didn't drop its leaves, it's going to drop them before the new ones pop out, just like the mesquite. Now, the blue Palo Verde, that's the one that just displays those brilliant yellow flowers in the spring. And then it's going to produce a little bean pod from that. When the tree is young, it could be multi-trunk or single trunk, and that trunk is going to be a bluish green, but it starts to roughen and turns to a darker color as it gets older. And as I mentioned, they can be multi-trunk or single. Now, this is a tree that I personally, I'd avoid planting in grass. And if you have grass, then create that higher area, just like you see in the photo. So that way the root system isn't in the grass. Plus, too, when planting trees in grass, we have to really watch the trunk and that it doesn't get damaged by how we're, using the trimmers and that we don't get too much water up against the trunk. Okay, now this is so we covered the Palo Verdes and the mesquites. Those were the 30-foot tall and wide. Now we're getting into a couple of the smaller trees. And these fit really well in those smaller spaces where the lilac chase tree will only grow to about 20 foot tall and wide. Its canopy is, it's typically kind of that round vase shape. The leaves are shaped like a hand and they grow to about 6 inches long. It's kind of that dull kind of green color, but what's nice about those leaves is they have that peppery spice-like scent. So if you crush them, it smells like crushed sage. The trunk is gray color and it could be either single or multi-trunk. But the showy part of this tree is those long lavender spikes, flowers that happen in the summer and into fall. It kind of depends on our monsoon rains. You might get a couple different flush of blooms. And this is a full deciduous tree. So in the wintertime, it's not going to have the leaves on it. What you're going to see is that beautiful branching structure. So here again, when I was talking south side of the house, this would be a good tree because it's dropping all its leaves. So it's a good tree for those smaller spaces that can't fit a 30-foot wide tree. So thing you want to keep in mind is if when we get the beautiful flowers, it's going to create a little seed. It's like a little peppercorn. And if you plant near a sidewalk, those little seeds could be problematic. So you just want to make sure you sweep them up or consider not planting it near a sidewalk. Another tree that's going to be a little bit smaller in form is the desert willow. And this is going to be, a little bit taller than the trace tree. It gets about 25 foot tall and wide. It has a beautiful spreading open crown. The willow-like leaves, they're similar to an oleander. They're long and thin, and the difference is they'll drop completely in the wintertime. So this is a full deciduous tree. Here again, in the wintertime, what you see is that beautiful branching structure. And you might get some seed pods that hang on in the wintertime. To me, they look like little Christmas ornaments. But the bark is smooth and grayish brown, but as it gets older, it starts to darken and roughen. But really, the thing about the desert willow is those beautiful, fragrant, trumpet-shaped flowers. They look similar to an orchid, but they appear in April and pretty much bloom all the way through September and maybe even to October. But they attract the hummingbirds, the butterflies, the pollinators, and it's just that beautiful smell. So the thing that the colors then will vary from a white to pink or into the purple, depending on which cultivar. And as I mentioned, the flowers will turn into little seed pods before they drop. Okay, the last tree on the list. This is the willow acacia. This is the big tall tree. So it's 40-foot tall, but it's not as wide. It's only about 20-foot wide. So it's really a good tree for a narrow space, or if you have a two-story building. You're trying to cast those shadows up onto that second story, onto the windows and walls. And so if that fits, that's a good characteristic. Another characteristic of the tree is it's that weeping, it's just very graceful weeping form, has that willow, even though it's not a true willow. But because of that look, they consider it a pull friendly. And it's an evergreen tree. But keep in mind, an evergreen tree, they drop their leaves year round, and then they grow new leaves. So they drop leaves, then they grow new leaves. Same with the flowers. They're going to pop out this little kind of yellowish cream puffball flower. It kind of pops out year round, but it's usually the most abundant in the spring. Then it creates that narrow, long seed pod, and it grows to about 4 inches, and it turns into a brown color, and that's going to drop. The trunk of the tree, it's usually a single trunk versus like some of the other ones we're talking multi-trunk. This is typically a single trunk. It's grayish brown and smooth when young, and then it gets a little bit more texture and roughens as it gets older. All right, I hope that you're thinking about all those different characteristics. Always think of that full-size tree. That when I'm saying 30 feet, you need at least 30 feet in diameter. Okay, so always plan for that full size, even though when you're getting them, they're small, but they're going to grow into that size. Because it's important that we select the right tree for the right place because, well, this is what I don't want you to do. And I'm always lost for words when I come to this slide. So my best advice is just don't replicate this at home. This tree was way too big for where it was planted, being right by the house. Over its whole life, it's been pruned and topped to try to keep the canopy. So it's an eyesore. Definitely, just don't replicate this at home. Plant your tree far enough from the property or from the house to give it space to grow into, but still can cast those shadows onto the wall. Okay, so how to plant and care for your tree. Well, we got some site preparation that we have to consider. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call 811 or we're going to go online at arizona811.com. And the reason why is, well, one, it's easy to do. Second, it's the law. We are required to do it. And either way, if you go online or you call it, it's free. So just go ahead and do your due diligence, call 811 or go online. And the main reason why is you want to avoid any contact with potential dangerous utilities. And this is important because those utilities could be anywhere in your private property and they can be at any depths. And so you need to plan ahead. When you call them, they need some time to come out and mark. And so usually 2 working days to mark it. And then those are going to be good for 15 working days. And so you also want to plan to plant. So wherever those lines are marked, you got to plant at least 2 feet from either side of those painted lines, preferably up to 10 feet. Okay, here's another polling question. I should call 811 to coordinate utility marketing to A, comply with Arizona Underground Facility Protection. Yes. B, keep myself and my community safe. That's a good idea. C, avoid disruption to vital services that we all rely on every day. That's important. Or D, ensure I'm making the best choice in terms of the environmental impact. Or E, all of the above. All right, I'll just give you a few more seconds. So the correct answer is yes, it's E. Those are all the things that we want to do. Okay, So as I mentioned, in your packet, you're going to have the planting guide with all the information I'm going to cover here in the next few slides. But in the end, when you're done planting your tree, this is what we're looking for. There's your tree. It's a little bit high. We want to have that root flare at surface level or a little bit high. That's what we're seeing here. We want that little dip, so that's why we have a watering well, and it'd be great to put like a wood chip mulch into that to help hold the water, keep making the sponge, help hold the moisture in the soil. So how do we go about that? Well, I want you to put your energy into planting wide, not deep, okay? It's important that we don't over dig our holes on the depth because I want the tree to be sitting on a solid surface. Notice how this has not been excavated. This is solid, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to dig your hole 3 to 5 times the width of that root ball. Now, the good thing is your tree, it's going to come in a pot. It's a 5-gallon pot. So not very big at all. I like that because I know I got to just dig my hole about 3 foot wide, okay? Maybe even up to 5 feet. You're loosening that hard soil, so you're decompacting it. But notice there's this chimney hole. Okay, what's that drainage hole? So what I want you to do when this is the perfect spot. This is we're going to be the center of the hole where your tree's planted. I want you to come off a foot or two, and I want you to dig a hole. You can dig that hole about a foot deep and about a foot wide. Okay. I want you to fill it completely full of water. We go through, fill it completely full again, and if you have water after 24 hours still in the hole, you have poor drainage. So you're going to have to dig a chimney hole. And that's what we're showing here is the chimney holes. Notice they're not underneath the root ball. Okay, they're off to the side. You might have to dig multiple chimney holes. You're trying to bust through that caliche or hard pan, what's keeping it hard to drain. Okay, so we have digging our hole. How do I know how deep? Okay. It's a soil probe, but I'm going to use it as a tree. And I want you to think about when you're taking the soil in the pot, I want you to move it around. I want you to find that root flare. Follow the trunk down, you're going to find that root flare. Okay? So then I want you to measure from the bottom of the pot up to that root flare. And let's say it's 10 inches. So your hole depth is only 9 inches. Not bad at all. I'm only going to dig 9 inches deep, but I'm going to dig 3 to 5 times as wide. So now when you take the tree, I don't want you to pick the tree up by the trunk and carry it by the trunk. I want you to support the tree by the bottom. I want you to carry the pot. You're just supporting the tree from moving around. Now I'm going to put it on its side and I'm going to tap around the pot. I'm going to tap on the bottom. Now I'm holding the tree, embracing it, and I'm pulling the pot off the root ball. And then I'm going to examine that root ball. I'm going to see if there's any roots growing and circling. You know, imagine that they're in that pot and it's keeping, we don't want it to keep that circling. Okay, so I'm going to rake them down with my hands. If I might have to trim a few off, but I don't want it to remember that circle. Okay, so move those roots out. And then I want you to place the plant into the hole. Okay, take a straight edge, a board. A rake works really well because a rake has a flat handle. Lay that over the hole, measure, and look to see if that root flare is right at surface level or a little bit higher. If it's too low, then go ahead and grab under the root ball and lift the plant out, place it off to the side, put some of the soil back in the hole and go ahead and tamp it down. That's the only time I really want you to see, tamping that soil down because I want the root ball to sit on solid surface. Go ahead and place the tree back into the hole. Take your board or your rake, make sure that root flare is right at surface level or a little bit higher. Once you feel like, yep, I got the right depth, then you're just going to start backfilling that hole. Notice there's no mention about any fancy amendments, compost, or anything like that. I want you to just backfill that with the native soil that you dug out. The reason why is the trees that are selected on this list are indigenous to our soil or they're adapted to our soil. So just bring that soil right back. You're going to want to use a hose on a slow flow of water to help settle that soil as you're backfilling. Or take the shovel and flip it around and use the handle part, and you're going to tamp around. Not really compacting it, you're just trying to get some of that air out of the soil. Leave a little dip, so that way you have a watering well. Okay. Then your tree is planted. Be great to put in some organic mulch, as I mentioned, just helps hold the moisture in the soil longer. Now you might be thinking, I might have to stake these trees. Now, I don't like staking trees unless I absolutely have to. Staking trees, well, it gives them a support system, and if they don't need it, then it can help build their trunk. What we don't want to do is improperly stake a tree to where it can't move. You want the tree to move. You just want to stabilize that root ball. So on the willow acacia, that's a pretty tall tree. And so they're likely going to be what's called a nursery stake. That's going to be tied to the trunk of the tree. You're to remove that nursery stake when you plant it. Actually, before you plant it, cut the stake off, plant the tree. It's going to want to lean. It likely will stand right back up, but if it doesn't, then that tree should be staked. Or if the root ball fell apart, you're pulling it off and now the root ball is real loose, good chance you're going to have to stake that tree because you're stabilizing the root ball. Reach out to Trees Matter. They have resources on how to properly stake a tree, if that is something that you need to do. Okay, there's another poll question. What is the correct depth of the planting hole? So is it A, width times height times length? I don't remember saying any formula like that, but B, 90% of the height of the root ball. Remember, we don't want to plant these too deep, and that's what is the correct depth of the planting hole? C, 3 to 5 times the width of the root ball? Or D, depends on what type of soil you have. That's kind of a tricky one. If it's hard, it's hard soil. It might be hard digging. But go ahead and you got a few more seconds to end the poll. So the correct answer is B, 90% the height of the root ball. Good job. Right, so all the trees on the list are low water use trees. And that's a good thing because once they get fully established, they could survive on rainfall, but we have to give them a little bit more supplemental water, especially if we're not getting the rains. But for the first, up to 3 to 5 years to get a tree fully established, we really want to make sure that we're giving it the right amount of water, definitely for those first, 1 to 3 years. And so that way it can establish the roots properly. But we have to think about where we're getting our water from. So water and energy are tightly knitted together. And as you can see by the information on the screen, SRP has this massive delivery system. So we have our Verde River watershed, the Salt River watershed, those two meet, so two watersheds meet, and then that gets delivered through canals and miles of different laterals, and there's underground wells, but that's a lot of energy to deliver the water to our homes. So I want you to be thinking about that. Every time that we turn on the faucet or our irrigation system, that's using energy. Same like turning on a light switch, that's using water. So you're going to have to water them with a hose, with drip irrigation, or with those who are on flood irrigation. Keep in mind that you might want to create a little bit higher spot so that way they're not getting all the water from the flood irrigation. And some sources that you may have not considered. So gray water. Gray water is our water from our bathroom sinks, the bathtub showers, our laundry. Our laundry machine is typically the easiest gray water source to plumb to the landscape. And so with the right type of soaps, these are a good source of water to help water our landscape. It's not our toilet water, it's not our dishwasher, and it's not our kitchen sink water. Those are considered black water. And yes, I know we haven't had much rain lately, but when it does rain, I want you to be thinking about that. 1 inch of rain, 1,000 square foot area, that's 600 gallons. And so if you don't know where your water is going now, if it's just going rushing off of the roof and through the landscape and right in the stormwater system, we want to slow that down. We want to spread it and sink it in our yards. I want you to plant that rain for your new plants. And so how you do that is you create a series of berms, basins, swells, terraces, French drains. There's different techniques that you can do, but it's all about slowing it down, allowing the rain to spread out and sink into your soil. If we add that mulch, a rock mulch or a wood chip mulch, both will help hold moisture in the soil, but a wood chip mulch feeds the soil. And I like that part. And definitely benefits of capturing rainwater. Well, when it rains, that's free water. And if you've been fortunate to be some of the areas that received rain, you'll notice that all the plants look a little bit lusher and green today. And that's just the benefit of that free rainwater. And if we can tap into our rainwater and reduce our potable water, well, that's also going to save energy. And so if we can integrate our rainwater and our gray water, that's the idea, is that we're reducing our reliance on the potable water to water those plants. All right, here's another polling question. Okay, I would consider using basins, berms, and swells, or French drains in my landscape because A, capturing rainwater on my site saves water. That makes sense. B, watering my trees and plants with rainwater is healthier for them. As I mentioned, today, a lot of plants are looking pretty green and happy. And rainwater is free. All right. So go ahead and end the poll. So the correct answer is D, all of the above. Okay. So let me go ahead and stop this. There we go. So you might be thinking, well, okay, Ryan's talking about water. Well, how much water do I give them? Well, as a water program specialist, I get to speak to this daily at my work. And I just want you to know this doesn't apply for just a new tree that you're planting. It applies for all your plants. And it's all about the right moisture depth. And you can see when we're watering trees, we're going to water to a deeper depth because they're deeper roots. Those small little annual perennials have shallower roots. And how do we know? Well, we can check our moisture depth with the soil probe or a long screwdriver. It depends on how long it is and how deep you're trying to check. And another resource, which is out of the Landscape Watering by the Numbers guide, it's this here, gallons of water required to wet the root zone. I love this because it gives me an idea on how much water I should be watering that plant when I'm watering. Nothing to do with frequency, just when I'm watering it. And so if I'm a 3-foot tree, when I'm getting it, that's a small little baby tree, but I'm going to give it about 11 gallons when I'm watering it to wet that root zone area. Okay. But notice as it grows, a 20-foot tree, when I water it, I'm going to give it about 235 gallons. And it depends on our soil type. Clay is typically what we have, but there could be areas where there's sand or a combination. And so that just means the water is either going to drain through faster or slower. So it's how we're applying that water is important. So where we water is also important. A lot of times I see when trees get installed, the drip emitters get placed right at the root ball, which is where they're supposed to go to help where the root ball and the native soil meet. But then after a year, that tree's growing. Well, those emitters should move out, or for watering by a hose, I need to move that out now to the canopy edge, to the drip line. Same with our shrubs and ground covers. We shouldn't be watering right at the base of the plant. We should be moving out because those roots are moving out to the size of the plant. We always want to avoid watering near the trunk. The reason why is that root flare I talked about. Anything above it doesn't like moisture. Anything below can take moisture. So we want to keep the moisture away from the trunk. So frequency. Now, when your plants are established, you can use this guide. Okay? That's your established plants. But this is the guide that you're going to be using when you pick up your plants for the time of year. It tells you here weeks 1 and 2, how often, all the way to week 8. And by that time, we're going to be in the summer months. And so you'll be considering probably watering maybe once every 5 to 7 days at first, because they're trying to get their new roots into the soil. And then the next year, a little bit longer in between and so forth. And I mentioned earlier, the water and energy are so tightly knitted together. And so, as I've been talking about, it's that integration. I don't want you to think about just planting a tree. I want you to think about where you're planting the tree, why you're planting the tree, to really maximize that energy savings. So that's important. Adding that mulch to help hold the moisture in the soil longer, that's important. Think about all the other plants that are going and helping to cast shadows. Those are important. It's all the integrated system that will help us save energy and cool our environment, which is also going to conserve water. Okay, here's another polling question. So how can you save energy and water by planting a tree? Selecting a native desert adapted tree? That makes good sense because that's low water and I'm going to get shadows, but with a low water plant. Properly locating and planting a tree, that's really important because we've been talking about that. We want to make sure that we don't plant it too close to the utilities. We want to make sure that we're planting it in the right place to maximize those savings. Taking proper care of a tree, yes, that's really important. It's the trees that we want to keep providing benefits for years and years to come. So the maintenance is really important. On D, all of the above. Okay, and the polling, and that is the correct answer is D, all of the above. So maintenance. There's always going to be maintenance no matter what plants we select, and be a difference between low or high maintenance. And so for maintenance, we want to make sure that we're doing our pruning correctly. This is a big one where when you get the tree, if a little tiny branch got broke during the transportation, then go ahead and snip that little one off. But the first year, I don't want you doing much with it. I just want to plant the tree, let it spend its energy into getting the roots established. So don't do much pruning on it. After the first year, you might do a little snip here, a little snip there, second year the same, and then by the third year, that structure. If you're not comfortable with how to prune a tree correctly, hire an arborist. They'll know the tree and the space that it's in and the proper pruning techniques for it. And then definitely, we want to be responsible on how we're disposing of our branches and the debris. And so again, if you need some assistance, always consult with a professional. And that is really the nice thing about the trees on the list. If we do our part, we're going to plant the tree in the right place. We're going to care for it and water it, get it to become a healthy, vigorous tree. Then they're not going to be susceptible to these kind of diseases. And that is the good news. Okay, this is my last slide. So I do want to thank you. And it's really important that you stay on. Tanya's going to come back with some more information with SRP. And then Brittany's going to come back on with the information on how to order and pick up your trees. But I do want to take the time to just say thank you once again. But I also want to remind you, please plant those trees. They're just waiting to get out of the pots and into their new home. So do your homework, call that 811 before you do any digging. And you may need to protect your trees. So if you have dogs or javelina, rabbits, they can cause havoc on that new baby tree. So you might need to use some chicken wire or hardware cloth to build a little fence around them and to help protect them. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. And here's Tanya.
Greetings once again, SRP customers. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today at SRP's virtual Shade Tree Workshop. One of the many reasons SRP is giving away free trees is for energy savings. For more energy savings ideas, rebates, and offers, please visit savewithsrp.com. Water saving is top of mind, and SRP has our annual Water Conservation Expo happening the first Saturday of March. For more information, please visit srp.net/expo to register for a deeply discounted smart irrigation controller. There are several helpful landing pages on this slide, so please do check them all out, including that srp.net/history landing page. Super interesting if you're not familiar with SRP history. Thank you again for joining us today. And now here's Brittany again from Trees Matter with next steps.
All right, thank you, Tanya. Now, in this next section, I'm just going to be walking you through these last few slides. This is all super important pickup information that you have been waiting for, that you have been asking about in the Q&A. So listen up, yeah? For most participants, a link is going to pop up for you once you leave the Zoom webinar. That link is going to direct you to a landing page that includes an evaluation form and a link to the tree order form, okay? If this does not pop up for you, though, don't worry. You will receive all relevant information in your follow-up email that you'll receive sometime next week. Make sure you check any junk, spam, promotions folders. We do use an email service, and sometimes those folders can kind of suck up our email. So just keep an eye on those. So again, within 1 week, we will send an email to all confirmed attendees that includes a evaluation form, a tree order form, the virtual packet we've been linking to, a link to the PowerPoint slides that you just watched Ryan so capably present to us all. And there's also going to be a link to a recording of today's workshop. So if there's anything you missed, anything you need to review, you will be able to do so in real time and rewatch this presentation. That will come about a week. We'll probably get that to you sometime late next week. But again, make sure you check all of those filters so that you receive that email. So in spring of 2025, this is going to be starting in early March. We will have 3 pickup events for you to choose from. All of the pickup events will run from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. We have one March 8th in the West Valley area, March 22nd in the Tempe, North Chandler area, and then April 12th in the Mesa, Tempe area. You will be able to choose your trees and your pickup preference on the order form that you receive. Okay, more details about those specific locations you will receive both in an email, and also the tree order form now has those specific location information, those specific locations on the tree form. Okay, so you can see those when you get that link. And here's just a couple things to keep in mind. Here's a couple pictures of the trees themselves. These are 5-gallon saplings, like Ryan, showed you guys with the pot that he had. These are really quite manageable size pots. Depending on the species, the saplings are going to range in height from about 2 to about 6 feet. You can see the picture there. That's one of our lilac chase trees on the smaller side. Some of the taller ones, the thornless mesquite, the willow acacia. It really just depends. But the fundamental thing to keep in mind is that these trees can fit into your average vehicle, okay? Into any sort of compact car or truck. We've seen these trees go away from our events in all sorts of types of vehicles. So there's no need to rent a U-Haul or bring your trailer or bribe your neighbor to borrow his truck. You don't need to do any of that, okay? Just bring your regular commuter vehicle and we'll get you all taken care of with your trees. Do think about, they're trees, they have dirt, so maybe think about bringing an old sheet or some plastic bags to keep your car tidy. Something to do. Now, this is the last slide in our presentation, okay? This is just a little bit of information. If you have any sort of follow-up questions, just some things that might be helpful for you as you prepare for tree pickup season. Any trees that you have, any questions that you have about trees or about the program in general, please contact us, Trees Matter, at the email that you see here, shadetree@treesmatter.org. You can also call our voicemail line. I'm sure a lot of you have already availed yourself of that, 602-325-1254. You can get in touch with the Debs at experts@treesmatter.org. And like Ryan said, it is so very important that you call Arizona 811 at least 2 weeks before you plan to plant. I wouldn't do it quite yet, but make sure that that's a part of your planting plan, right? You want to make sure that you know where those utilities are. You want to make sure that you've submitted that 811 ticket. It's very, very important. Now, we will be leaving the Zoom open for just a couple more minutes. I see that the Q&A hasn't been too busy today, so we're grateful for that. Hopefully everybody got a lot out of the presentation. I just want to thank you all so much while you're getting any last minute questions wrapped up. I want to thank everybody over at SRP, of course, right? Tanya, our whole team over there at SRP, our very dedicated presenter, Ryan Wood, and our Spanish interpreter, Yasmin Venegas, with the bilingual experience. We're so grateful to have her, especially providing this live Spanish interpretation for these workshops. It's such a great thing we're able to provide. We also, of course, want to thank you all for your interest today in the program and in trees, and for taking time out of your Saturday and out of your 3-day weekend. Hopefully you have a 3-day weekend this week. We're glad that you've chosen to spend some time with us and to learn about how to make the Valley a shadier place. Keep an eye out for that email and from any communication from us. But if you do not have any questions for our experts in the Q&A, there will be no additional information presented today. So the workshop is over. If you would like, you can go ahead and press the red leave button in your Zoom interface, and we will see you in the